Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to be doing an extreme tote repair. In my last video I showed you how to break down the Stanley number 4 and the Stanley bedrock number 606. The tote on that old 606 was in really bad shape. You can see that black tape, it was wrapped all around and around and around, and the old tote is broke into 3 pieces. That's why I called it an extreme tote repair. The challenge here is to make a solid repair that's going to hold up for another 100 years and at the same time look good. Getting that old cloth tape off was not an easy task. It hardens on there about like cement. Once you find an end, just start working it and eventually it'll come off. The brakes are old and they're dirty. So the first thing I have to do is clean them up with a soft brass wire brush. All I'm doing is making sure there's not any dirt, grime, splinters. This is going to be a 2-part repair, so I'm only doing the bottom brake first. Good news is, don't see any signs of old glue, so that's going to help a little bit. To glue these 2 halves together, you're going to need some Gorilla Glue, some black electrical tape. I wear some nitrile gloves because that Gorilla Glue is some nasty stuff, and a paper towel that's well soaked with water. First thing you're going to do is put on your gloves, and then you're going to moisten both halves that you're going to join together with water. The instructions on the Gorilla Glue tell you this is what you're supposed to do. Next, I'm going to apply the Gorilla Glue to 1/2 of the brake, making sure that I've got a generous coat on there. Once that's applied, I'm going to line up the 2 halves and push and wiggle it around, try to get it lined up where it's supposed to be. And for now I'm just going to set it down. Now comes the hard part. I got to figure out how to take this black electrical tape and use that like a clamp to hold this whole mess together. Now I've started a second piece from the bottom and I'm wrapping it around, trying to help this thing stick together. I'm stretching the tape just a little bit so that it works like a clamp. I'm going to make a couple wraps, and then I'm going to try to line that brake back up again. I'm going to start some more tape all the way from the back corner, coming up around over the tip of the horn, back down to that back corner. Same as the last time. Now because the tape isn't pulling straight, it's wanting to make it slip backwards. So to prevent that, I'm going to wrap it all the way around from top to bottom. I got one wrap. Now I can start to stretch. Stretching makes it work like a clamp. Not exactly great video. Alright, I'm going to break that. I'll see if I can get it to line up. So I actually had to break away from the recording to do the work, so now I'm going to explain what I did. I did the wraps from top to bottom several times around, made them tight. What that did, because of the angles of the pieces being glued together and the angle of the top and the bottom of the tote, it pulled the bottom side forward, or the top side went forward, and there's a big gap there at the back. So to pull the top back and even up this back edge, I wrapped the tape around from above the brake to the front of the tote, and that pulled it back. Still had a gap there, so to close that gap up, then I put the clamp on. So there is no easy way to join these totes together. This one was harder than most, because most of the time you still got the horn on here and the angles are normally situated in a way that you put tape on and you don't need to use anything extra for clamping. So all that said, it needs to sit overnight and dry. 2 hours minimum. I'm going to leave it sit overnight. It's been 24 hours and it's time to remove the tape. And so far the results are quite promising. It's time to glue the horn back on. I'm going to repeat the process that I used for the lower half of the plane. Using this nice soft brass wire brush, cleaning up the brakes. Then I want to wet both surfaces. I'm going to apply the glue to one half and then carefully fit the two pieces together. A lot of glue oozed out. You can hold that in place. Take your rag, wipe it off, and that way you can better check the fit. Now I got to apply the tape so it's pulling down on the brake, and it's going to work as my clamp. First piece is just to initially hold it in place. Once I've got that, I'm going to start to wrap it around and stretch. This piece is a lot easier to do, knock on wood, than what the bottom half was. That's it. Now it's just a matter of checking the alignment. Going to sit and dry for a minimum of 2 hours. And another 24 hours have passed and it's time to remove the tape. It's kind of like unwrapping a Christmas present because you just don't know what you're going to get. And now we get to see it. There's a look at the left side and a look at the right side. I've done some tote repairs in the past where that black cloth tape was used, and that black staining right there is difficult to make it completely disappear. Good thing about it is the rosewood always has some black tones in it, so either way it's going to come out looking pretty good as long as those joints are tight. Next thing I'm going to do is use one of my homemade scrapers. I showed you how to make them in a separate video. It's got a fresh burr on it, and I'm going to use the scraper to remove this Gorilla Glue that's flowed out of the edges and remove all of the lacquer finish. So you kind of pick and flick the Gorilla Glue off. There it goes. And once all the Gorilla Glue is gone, I'm going to start scraping off the lacquer finish like I'm doing here. And I'm going to cut back in after I've got all the lacquer scraped off. And here's what the tote looks like with the lacquer scraped off. Where the brakes were, I used the scraper to shape it back up and remove any ridges that were on there. I like to use a scraper instead of sandpaper. The next thing I'm going to do is sand that tote with 150 grit paper going with the grain. Then I'm going to go to a sanding sponge. It's a fine sponge, sanding with the grain. And then for some 4/0 steel wool. With the 150 done, it's on to the sanding sponge. I'm going to do this exactly like the sandpaper, but a lot less work because the sandpaper did 90% of it. I'm going with the grain over the entire tote. And after the sanding sponge comes the steel wool. Always working with the grain. This is when you get to get a pretty good idea of what that grain is going to look like. The steel wool starts to polish it up and give you an idea of the final finish. Now I'm going to use the tote bolt and run it through to make sure that I don't have any build-up Gorilla Glue in there. The threaded ends of that bolt work great for cleaning the Gorilla Glue out. Oop, there goes a piece right there. Next I'll be applying a coat of rosewood gel stain to the tote. I do that with these giant Q-tips that I buy from Northern Tool and Harbor Freight. Most of the time, one good coat is all that it takes. When the staining's done, I wipe it off with a blue shop towel. I like to use pencils to hold my totes and knobs when I take them over for finishing. And I like to use Minwax clear satin lacquer for the finish. The first coat of lacquer is always a light mist coat. It's just barely wetting the entire outside surface with a thin coat. After the mist coat is done, now I actually apply a little bit heavier coat. And while that lacquer dries and I continue to build up more coats, I realize I'm going to have to pay some attention to something I didn't think I was going to have to, and that's the front knob. The first step in fixing this knob is to apply Gorilla Glue. So now that I've put the glue on the knob, I got the gloves on, I'm going to use those gloves. I'm going to rub. Try to work that glue down into the cracks even more than what it already is. All the way on the bottom, the sides, and on the inside. Wipe off the excess, and it's on to the black electrical tape. That's what's going to be my clamp. Any kind of luck, I put this on really tight, multiple wraps, and we're going to close up those cracks. So I got one wrap around. Now it's time to start stretching and making it tight. Break it off, and it looks to me like it's been closed up. I wiped off the excess glue with my blue shop paper towel, but it will continue to ooze out, swell, and foam up and then dry hard. It's been 24 hours and it's time to take the tape off the front knob. And the next step is a drill press with 120 grit paper, and then my sanding sponge, and then some 4/0 steel wool. With the sanding done, it's time for a coat of rosewood stain. After the stain is done, I'm going to apply some lacquer just like I did for the tote, same exact finishing process. We'll take a look at this thing when it's all done. I've applied at least 5 coats of lacquer to the tote. Now it's time to sponge sand it and use some steel wool on it. What you don't want to do is get overly aggressive with your sanding and sand all the way through the lacquer back down to the wood. If you do that, it's more difficult to have a good finish at the end. Short of stripping it all back off and starting over, I've had good luck by applying multiple mist coats back over the entire tote to start to even it up from where the lacquer got sanded all the way through. When you're happy with the sanding results and you haven't gone all the way through, you want to finish it up with the steel wool and prep it for the next couple of coats. Now the old tote that was broken into 3 nasty looking pieces is put back together and ready for its final coats of lacquer. You're probably going to think I switched it for a good tote. I promise you I didn't. This is the exact same tote that we started with that was busted into 3 pieces. Here's a look at the other side. I'm going to go ahead and put the final coats of lacquer on the same way I did the original coats. I'm going to come back and sand it just like I did just now with the sanding sponge and steel wool. And then this tote's going to be ready for a wax finish and put back on the plane. And there they are, all done. Tote and the knob. Let's take a close look at them and see what they look like. That knob turned out to be a stunning knob. It's got that nice bullseye design on the front. Tote, it is looking really good. If you didn't know it was broken, you probably wouldn't notice it. I've turned them both around so we can get a look at them from the other side. Let's go all the way around. And hopefully like this you can see how beautiful the grain is. Both the knob and the tote have some really nice figure in the grain. So while they are quite beautiful, they also appear to be somewhat fragile. That knob I think came out perfect. You can't even see where those fractures were at the bottom. The tote, if you look real close, you can still see a hint of where the break was at the bottom half of the tote. And the upper part too, but I mean, it is hard to see it. I think they're going to look real good when I get that 606 all cleaned up and actually attach them like they're supposed to be. You'll get to see the 606 and this triple patent number 4 in my next eBay listings preview. But I've got a lot more work to do on planes before my next eBay previews. This video went pretty good. I was happy with the way this tote and knob turned out. I hope that you learned that you shouldn't give up on them no matter how bad they look. A lot of times you can bring them back. Well, that's it for today. Next video, no idea what it's going to be. Got to look to the pile. Until then, time for supper. Bye.